Now, just to look quickly, and how much time? Oh. The grammar, if you look at the sciences that were developed by the Muslims, grammar is the Arabic grammar is the first deep intellectual analysis of language. Prior to that, grammar was very superficial. The Arab grammarians went into such depth and profundity into the language that they presaged all of modern linguistic thought and theory. Really. I mean, you take old grammar books from Basra and Kufa, which were the two great centers of grammar in the classical Islamic world, and you look at the ideas that these people were talking about, you literally become overwhelmed and amazed at the subtlety and the depth of this intellectual tradition. They scientifically broke down the Arabic language. They recognized patterns that had not been recognized in language before, what they now call semantic trees, diagramming. They were doing all of these things. They taught the Jewish people grammar of Hebrew. Prior to that, the Hebraic grammar was extremely rudimentary. If you look, the Hebrews did not even know that their language was based on triliteral roots. They didn't know that. It was the Muslim grammarians that taught them that. The Muslim grammarians taught them adjectives. The Hebrew language is extremely poor in adjectives. All of medieval Hebraic poetry is based on Arabic meters of poetry that was developed by Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad. The Jews did not have sophisticated poetry prior to that. No, their great poetry that if you went to Tel Aviv University is all based on Andalusian Jewish poets who were imitating the meters of the Muslim poetry. You see, so they have a massive intellectual debt. And I really think in a lot of ways the intellectual debt that Europe, what they call quote unquote the Judeo-Christian culture, which is a fabricated word invented in the 1930s or something like that. Prior to that they used to call it the Greco-Roman culture. And then suddenly this word starts popping up and now it's become the Judeo-Christian. I mean, obviously during the pogroms in Europe that existed, no European would want Judeo attached to Christian culture. I mean, that would be anathema. Why were they kicking them all out? So traditionally it was the Greco-Roman culture. But these people have such a massive debt to the Muslim ummah that really it goes beyond explanation. I mean, you just have to superficially look at their own sciences and all of their mathematics. I mean, one of the theories, this is the traditional European Orientalist theory about Islam, that all of the classical Hellenistic tradition was deposited in the bank of the Muslim Khilafah, right? In other words, we got all these books, we put them in the bank and we never looked at them. And there was no accruing of like interest, intellectual interest. They just stayed there. And then these great Europeans rediscovered these books, right? And then that was it. That's a complete fabrication of what happened. The Muslims took Hellenistic thought and expanded on it, criticized it, threw out large sections of it, used sections of it, and it was reintroduced in Europe solely with commentaries. In other words, the European, there is no St. Thomas Aquinas without Ibn Rushd, and he is their greatest medieval scholar. And he literally is the foundation of the Catholic Church, St. Thomas Aquinas. There is no, Aquinas does not exist without Ibn Rushd. He doesn't exist. And you can look at his section on just war and recognize that it's just a translation of Islamic Fiqh from Ibn Rushd's book. He talks about maslaha, mafsada, I mean, it's massive mathematics. There is no Newton without Ibn Qurra, there is no Newton without Khwarizmi, there's no Leibniz, there's no calculus without algebra, which is the contribution of the Muslims. There is no higher mathematics without people like Omar Khayyam. It's impossible. And this is truth, this is fact. Why then, you see, out of this arrogance, why then are they so abusive? I think personally that, and this is ishara, and I take full responsibility for it, but I think one of the meanings, wallahu ta'ala a'lam, of one of the signs of the end of time, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَن تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا, that the servant woman would give birth to her master or her mistress. I really think it has many meanings, and obviously the most important is that it's a social disequilibrium, everything's turned upside down. But I think one of the meanings is that the ummah, because amma, right, is from the same root as ummah, that the ummah of Islam, which was intellectually a humble ummah, it was an ummah based on ubudiyah, on slavehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It gave birth to Europe's civilization. But then Europe turns around and treats it like some pathetic amma that they can order around, that they can destroy with impunity, that they can go in and do whatever they want, and then not give any attribution of what they have stolen intellectually. And I say stolen simply because knowledge is free for the world, but you steal it when you don't attribute it to your source, to where it was derived from. And there's an intellectual responsibility that goes with taking the ideas of others, and this is why even in this culture they footnote everything. Where did you get that? Well, why don't you footnote that our whole civilization, put a little footnote number 1, the Islamic civilization. There's your number 1 footnote. Why don't you put that? I mean, there was a book written called The History of Knowledge by Charles Van Doorn. And in the introduction, he says, one of the people he dedicates it to is Ibn Khaldun. But the truth is, he should dedicate the whole book to the Islamic civilization, who were not only the caretakers of human knowledge for over 800 years, but also those who added to it great thought, great ideas, great contributions, and then gave it to us. Right? I mean, really, the Muslim, they used to teach the Christians in Andalusia. They would come and sit at the feet of Muslims, and the Muslims would allow them into their circle. And some of the ulama criticize that. In fact, Qadi Iyad says, we shouldn't let the Europeans come and sit in our circles because they take all of our knowledge and then they go and take it to their people and don't tell them where they got it from. And that's already 5th, 6th century. So the intellectual legacy is awesome and it's overwhelming.